Happy belated Christmas, everyone. I am recording this on December 26th, so the day after Christmas. I am analyzing Game 2 of a recent over-the-board tournament that I played. If you missed my first video in this series, I analyzed my first game. I got cooked by a 7-year-old in round 1. I played 1e4 and got the French defense, so if you're a 1e4 player or a French defense player as black, go ahead and check that game out. I thought it was fairly instructive, even though I made an early mistake in the game and my opponent made sure to capitalize on it. So this video is focusing on Game 2. I played an opponent named Jim Orner. He was rated 290 USCF, and he had the white pieces. Just a little bit of background on kind of my mentality going into the game. Obviously, lost my first round against a 7-year-old, and I said in that video, nothing to take away from a younger player. I know they're great, and I went into that game knowing it was going to be a challenge, but losing your first game of a tournament can be a little bit disheartening. So going into the second game, I tried to remain positive. If you're unfamiliar with how a Swiss format tournament works, in the first round, you're paired just according to the way you're ranked in your section. And for all future rounds, you're paired based on the number of points you've scored in the tournament so far. So in round 2, if you beat somebody in your first round, you'll likely be playing another person that won. And likewise, if you didn't win in the first round, you'll likely be playing somebody with 0 points as well. So that continues on throughout the tournament. You continue to play people who, as close as possible, match the number of points you have in the tournament. So in Game 2, I had the black pieces. I was playing Jim. I knew that he was ranked significantly lower than me, USCF, but one thing that's really important to point out for over-the-board tournaments, especially if you're new to playing over-the-board and rated, I have found that over-the-board ratings are vastly different than what you may be used to online. For example, I am 747 USCF, but online I play in the mid 1400s, 1500s range in rapid. So there's a huge discrepancy between skill levels between playing over the board rated and playing online rated. So even though I knew my opponent was lower rated than me and I knew that he lost his first round, I didn't by any means think that it was going to be an easy game, and of course went into the game trying to play my best chess possible. So I'll get right into it. My opponent opened with 1e4, and I'm a Caro-Kann player, so I responded with c6, and interested to see where he played here. He went with knight f3, which I was kind of bummed to see. I run into this response online quite a bit, and typically what happens when an opponent responds with knight f3 is I get the exchange caro, which I think is a little bit slower and less tactical than some of the different variations. So I was a little bummed to see that, but it doesn't affect my plan of playing d5. Again, in the Caro, the idea of playing c6 on your first move is preparing d5, trying to counter-strike in the middle by controlling those two squares after white has played e4, controlling a couple of squares on your side of the board. So I did respond with d5, and Jim surprised me. My opponent surprised me by playing knight c3 and keeping the tension in the center, which I thought would make for a fun game. You know, he could take at any time, I could take at any time, or he could even push for an advanced Caro. So this made me a little interested. I was happy to see that we got the two knights variation instead. And I developed naturally by playing bishop g4. If you're unfamiliar with the Caro-Kann, one of the main ideas is that people kind of call it like a better French, in the sense that you get your light square bishop out of the pawn chain. And I know that if he attacks my bishop with h3, I can just take on f3, because as it stands now, 5 of my pawns are on light squares and soon to be 6 when I play e6. So this is a very natural square to develop the bishop. Even though you give up the bishop pair willingly, the light square bishop often is your worst piece when you're playing the Caro-Kann. So I wasn't worried about any h3 moves. I would have just taken, and in the game he did play h3 right away. He definitely didn't have to. If you're in this position as white, you can develop your bishop to e2, backwards e2, or you can even develop further out. You don't have to waste a tempo on a pawn move, but white did, and like I mentioned before, I took. And interestingly enough, white took back with the g-pawn, and anytime something like this happens, whether it's an over-the-board game or an online game, an opponent makes a seemingly weird move, alarm bells kind of start going off in the sense that like maybe, I'm playing not as strong of a player, just because in this, particular capture, it was interesting to me that he willingly accepted a long-term weakness of doubled pawns here on the F file, rather than, easily taking with the queen. And the queen is not going to be attacked easily. I could trade here on e4, but it's well protected, and there's no big risk in taking with his queen. By taking with the g-pawn, now he's got these doubled pawns. Developing his light square bishop is a little bit harder now because he doesn't have this diagonal to work with. Developing his queen is going to become more difficult, again, because he's blocked it in. So it was a very interesting choice by white, and I was happy to see it. It gave me possibly a weakness in the long term to attack in the game, but it didn't necessarily affect my plan in the game. I was going to continue developing as is natural for the Caro-Kann. I played e6. Another candidate move I had in this position was knight at f6, just developing naturally. And the reason I didn't end up playing that is because white still could cramp my position by playing e5, in which case I'd have to waste another tempo with the knight. So playing e6, I tried to stay flexible, give my knight this square to jump to if I needed to, getting out to g6 if needed. And again, now that I've traded off my light square bishop, I put almost every single one of my pawns on light squares just to make this piece even more, I guess, worthless, in the sense of it doesn't have a lot of good squares to go, and even if it did get out to this diagonal or somewhere here, it's going to be very difficult to attack my position with it. So I developed with my pawn, and my opponent responded with this b3 move, which again I found super interesting. In the Caro-Kann, I don't often run into like a fianchetto dark square bishop. It's probably more natural and a better move for white to just play d4 and give the dark square bishop this diagonal to work with. I don't know why he chose to fianchetto the bishop. I think it's just wasting another move. He's going to start falling behind in development. But again, having, two moves in a row where I was kind of surprised by the opponent. It again, is just setting off alarm bells. It kind of changes the way I think I might play in the game. Not that I'm going to fundamentally play super differently, but a couple of weird moves, starting to set off alarms in my head. So I decided to just develop naturally. I did end up putting my knight on this f6 square, even though he can easily attack it with e5. I thought I can get out here and I can still get my knight out to a6 if needed, and then I can jump it into c5 and have it be protected. So I just thought I should continue on in development. My opponent is likely going to be fianchettoing his bishop next based on his previous move. So that was my thinking in that. And my opponent surprised me again by playing d3. Again, this move is puzzling because not only does he again fail to develop any of his pieces, he didn't fianchetto the bishop like it seemed like he was preparing to. He's blocked in his light square bishop pretty badly. I mean, there's nowhere for it to go. It's not going to be doing anything. Of the, let's say, I think there's 16 pawns still remaining on the board. 13 of them are on light squares. So for him to have not developed his light square, not that it really has anywhere good to go, but d3 didn't make sense to me. And again, it set off alarm bells. So here, I'm just looking to develop. I know that my opponent has made some odd moves. I can get ahead in development, and because he made these weird b3 and d3 moves, I felt more emboldened to go for an attacking line. There's a number of good moves I could play. I could play knight b7. I could play bishop e7, bishop d6. bishop c5. I could play any of those. What I ended up playing is bishop b4, going for a more attacking line, and also knowing by playing this move there is only one good response to this move. And my opponent having made a few what I had considered at the time inaccuracies, I thought there could be a potential for him to make another mistake. If he fianchettoed his bishop like he had originally been planning to, he runs into this move where he's going to end up losing a piece. And so I wanted to give him an opportunity to make a mistake while still developing. I can castle on the next move if I want. That's kind of what's going through my head at this point after noticing a couple of odd moves. And my opponent makes, the only move that he can, which is bishop d2, protecting this fork because now I can't play e4 and attack this knight that is pinned to the king. So he breaks the pin, and because of that, I just castled, getting my king to safety, continuing to develop naturally. Even though he's made a few odd moves and I feel more emboldened to go on the attack, I still want to play solid chess and not end up with any issues with an alignment along the e-file. If I don't castle, he still can get his queen in here and take. Something like that could become a problem in the long run. So I chose to castle, and my opponent responds with queen e2. I don't know why the annotation symbols are showing up. I tried getting rid of those, but anyways, he moves his queen. Now he's signaling to me that he wants to castle long. And there's not a whole lot I could do about that. I did consider playing bishop a3, preventing the castle by attacking the c1 square. I decided against that. I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense. Again, trying to just get my pieces to good squares and develop naturally. I did opt to actually attack this knight. So I thought I had played knight bd7 on that move, but instead I played e4, attacking the knight, and was interested to see he didn't really have a lot of good squares to go to. I mean, he could undevelop it back to the first rank. He could put it here, which it's not doing a whole lot. So I was very interested to see what white was going to do in response to this move. And the other thing I was thinking here is when I push e4, it's going to be very hard for him to move his d-pawn, furthermore making this light square bishop ineffective in the game. I was hoping to play e5 next, again keeping these pawns locked into where they are and making sure that light square bishop has nowhere to go. My opponent responded with e5, which is actually a mistake. It is a counterattack on my knight, but he failed to calculate that actually the sequence of events, if he was thinking to attack my knight, would be take, and then I get a take with check. And now he's down a full piece, and I'm going to win this pawn back without damaging my pawn structure. And sorry, I drew this arrow. The king can't take. The king can only slide over. Or he could take with the queen and just lose a queen straight up. Obviously, he's not going to do that. So if I go back a few moves, he did miscalculate, and I knew that. So I took, and my opponent actually did realize, he paused here for a little bit, and he realized that he can't just take the knight because now I'm going to win another piece with this pawn. And he got his bishop out of the way, pinning my knight to my queen, and it's a double attack actually now with the e5 pawn. And here I paused because, again, I didn't want to give up the advantage that I already had. I was a little bit worried because now I'm thinking maybe I won't have an advantage anymore after he takes with his pawn, and I take back and force his dark square bishop to go somewhere. So in my head at this moment, I was thinking, don't ruin the advantage you already have. Let's just play sound, and I actually retreated my bishop. A better move would have probably just been counterattacking h6 here, because Then he has a decision to make. He can take or he can retreat, which is probably a better move. But instead, I unbroke the pin, which wasn't the best move because he can still take with his pawn. But my opponent did not do that. He actually slid his rook over, which at the time, I know I see the evaluation bar moving, and I'm not going to analyze this game in the context of the eval bar, but in the game, I didn't think this was a bad move because now I'm seeing if he can get bishop h6 in, he's got a lot of pressure on my g7 pawn. I would have to push it and lose the exchange here. Lose the exchange on my rook. So I see a lot of ideas here where he can put some pretty strong pressure on g7, and I didn't want to run into a lot of complications. I felt like my position was solid. His still felt pretty busted. Now he has to castle long, but he's got this open diagonal here, and I still have my dark square bishop. So I felt good about what was going on, but I didn't want to make any mistakes that would give up the advantage I knew that I had. So what I did here was I moved my knight, opened up a double attack on the bishop, and protected this square. So he can't play this move where I have to worry about playing g6 and giving up in exchange. So, and I did see, but miscalculated what could happen if he played f4, a discovery on the knight, which he actually did play in the game. He played this f4 discovery on the knight. And I responded improperly. What I actually did was a mistake. In the game, I played g6, and actually I can just play it. It's a blunder. And if you can see why, I just got the move order wrong. I didn't see that white could take, I'd have to take back, and then white would win this piece because I can't take back with this pawn. It's pinned to the knight pinned to the king by the rook. So I completely miscalculated that in the game. I thought, you know what, I'll just defend my knight. He's not going to take it with his queen anymore. Sorry, bad at drawing arrows today. And on the next move, I thought I could just take the bishop. Fortunately for me, my opponent didn't see that I miscalculated, and they just castled long, which, as you can see by the eval bar, completely swung in the other direction. By this time, I had recognized that I made a mistake during the game. So I played the move that would have been appropriate in the previous position. So had I not played g6, I really should have just taken, because he can take back, and then I can move this knight, move this knight to safety, and it's not an issue. I don't lose the piece. But since I didn't play that, and my opponent didn't see the mistake, I properly captured. He took back with the rook, which was definitely a mistake because now this pawn is undefended. Smarter, I think, would have been taking with the pawn. Again, just because now there's no pawn for me to take. But he took with the rook, and because he undefended that pawn, I took with the tempo on the queen, and I did calculate this line in the game. I thought the most proper response would be bringing the queen over here, getting all this pressure down the g-file on my king. And but I saw that if he did that, which he did in the game, attacking my undefended knight, I saw that I could pin the rook, and I did that by playing h6. The computer actually gives this move in inaccuracy because there is I think mate in 6 or mate in 7 on the previous move. By bringing my queen out, there's just this huge weakness on the dark squares over by white's king. I didn't see that in the game, nor was I really calculating that as a candidate move. I saw that I could pin the rook. I was just trying to play solidly. The rook can't go here because I'm taking back with the knight, and the rook can't go here because I'm taking with the pawn. So I play, oops, where did that go? My bad. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. I need to get to where I played h6. Sorry, g6. Yeah, g6 was the mistake. He long castled. Then I took back. He took back with the rook. I took with the knight. And he played this move. So I trapped the rook. he properly basically sacks the exchange. And my only thought here, I know that I'm going to go up a pretty significant amount of material. I just wanted to trade down as quickly as possible. I felt pretty confident in how the game was going, that I could secure the win. I just wanted to get any complexity off the board, so I took back with my queen, basically pinning his queen to the king and forcing a queen trade. Again, just to simplify, I'm up quite a bit of material, and I know that as long as I play solidly, take my time, I can close the game out. I think you would have been better to trade with me on g5, just because it forces me to double up my pawns. And I think, if there's anything that white could look for as compensation, it would be a weak square to attack. But in the game, my opponent actually retreated his queen. I'm thinking here to just bring a pawn to the center, but while that does centralize his pawn, he creates doubled pawns. So I wasn't sure why he did that. I was happy to trade with him, which I did, and he properly took back with the pawns. So now at this stage of the game, again, I'm up quite a bit of material. I've got the queens off the board. There's a lot of complexity out of this game. My only focus was finishing it out, trying to trade down, and getting the win. So as I looked at this position, there are a number of different things I needed to accomplish. I needed to develop this knight, which I hadn't yet. I could get a rook onto this half-open file, and then I'm going to start bringing my king into the game and take advantage of my my pawn advantage on the king side here, my 4 to his 3, with 2 of them being doubled. So that's my long-term goal in this position. I started by taking control of the file with the idea that I could start marching a pawn up here and trading with this trading his rook on the d file. He responds by playing d4. I think trying to kind of add a defense to it by giving it the e pawn to defend it, but in the end, I didn't think he was accomplishing a whole lot. He did open up this diagonal for his light square, which I noticed, but again, almost all of my pawns are on light squares. So that his one piece besides his rook is still going to be quite ineffective in this game. I knew that. I decided to push my c pawn. I thought here I'd be happy to lose a pawn to trade rooks. Again, take the complexity out. Then he's got 2 doubled pawns, and I've got a very solid pawn majority. On the king side, I felt comfortable enough that I could move one to promotion and win this game. He decided not to take, which is fine, attacking my c3 pawn, in which case I just developed naturally, getting my knight into the game. Finally, I did see that this light square diagonal was open here. If he were to ever develop his bishop, he could take and force, I guess, tripled pawns. He was eventually going to win this c3 pawn back, so I'd have double pawns on the c file, isolated double pawns. Yes, that's a weakness, but again, my lead in development, I think, would significantly outweigh that advantage. So I just developed. He took my pawn, and I decided to trade on d4. He took back, and I took again with my rook, hoping to double up on the d file. I noticed again, still he could get a double attack on the knight, but again, in that case, I'm losing a pawn. I'm still up a whole rook. I'm not super concerned about that sequence of events. He decided to play a3, which I thought was slow. He probably would have been much better to develop his bishop literally anywhere, but he doesn't have a lot of great choices. He is in quite a bit of a pickle because there's a huge material disadvantage. I continued on, doubling up my rooks, hoping to if he didn't end up developing this bishop, I could win a fork on it and just take it outright. I wasn't exactly sure what white was going to do in this situation. Again, I still think his best move would have been trying to attack my knight He didn't do that. He offered a rook trade, which is really interesting. When you're down so much material, the last thing you should be doing is trying to trade down. So it was a very curious move on his part. I didn't know exactly what he was getting at. And even though trading down is good for me, I saw that this rook is still protected and his pawn is undefended. So rather than trading with him, which I think would have been a perfectly acceptable move, I just centralized my knight further and attacked his rook just to see what he was going to do. I wasn't quite sure. He decided he wasn't going to trade rooks with me, which is a very odd move because he just simply wasted a tempo by offering the rook trade. Now he is controlling a half-open file, but there's not a lot going on there. Now I've got a 3-pawn advantage on the king side, and his only prayer of a hope is this c-pawn potentially becoming a passer, but he's just placed his rook in front of it. So it was all very curious by white here. I just continued playing naturally. I gave check on d1, forking the king and the bishop. The king only has one move here, b2, and I took the bishop again up. So much material here. Where's that sound? Oh, I accidentally started my Spotify. My apologies. I just took the bishop, and again here I'm just thinking, all right, I don't have a back rank problem. There's very few opportunities for me to make a massive mistake, but I'm still taking my time. I think by this time I probably had about a 10-minute advantage. I had used maybe 25 minutes of my clock. My only goal here is finish it out however I have to, but just play super solid. He attacks my undefended knight. I just push the pawn, protecting it, and getting ready to march these pawns up the board, getting ready to have my king follow behind, wanting to see what white's going to do, because if they ever did push c3 by chance, then they run into mate. Even if they pushed c4, they're running into a lot of problems. So I wasn't sure what he was going to do. He moved over, attacking this undefended pawn. This is part of my long-term plan, which is get my king involved, get it centralized. I protect the pawn, start moving my king to the center. He moves his rook back over. I think he's going for the c7 attack, but I see that I can just play d7 and it's protected by the knight, and there's no way for him to remove that knight. So I wasn't really worried about that. I just continued on pushing pawns, so f5. He did go ahead and play c7. And like I mentioned, I knew I had this d7 move to protect, so I did play that, protecting my b7 pawn, protecting obviously the check on the king. He retreated his rook. Again, white doesn't have a lot of great moves. They're down 10 points in material. He was right not to trade with me, but he doesn't have a lot of great choices in the position. So it didn't take much longer for me to close this game out. I just moved my king up. Now he's attacking my knight, which is defended by the king. I wasn't exactly sure what he was hoping to go for. I did notice now that his king and rook are on forkable squares. If I were able to get my knight into here, obviously his pawn is protecting it at this point in the game. So I pin the pawn to the king, hoping to get this fork in and remove another piece. He protects the rook, but it doesn't prevent the fork, and I'm happy to win this exchange, which I did. I gave check on d3, and again, he can't take with his pawn because it's pinned by the rook. He moves his king. I took the knight, and he took back. So now he's got these isolated doubled pawns. I've got 2 rooks and a whole boatload of pawns, and the rest of this game went by pretty quickly. My first move was to cut this king off. I didn't want it getting down here and cleaning up these 2 pawns to give this pawn a potential to promote. He attacked, and I just slid over, attacking h3, and again, keeping his king cut off from getting to my half of the board. He played c4. again, he doesn't have a whole lot of moves that he can make. And I gave check. He moved his king out of the way. I gave check again, knowing that mate is coming here soon. He only has 2 potential moves. He made the wrong one, actually. It's still mate in 3, but what he made, he moved to a5, which is just mate in 2. And so I did give mate on a3. We played it out, and we finished the game. The game in its entirety, I think, ran a little over an hour, like an hour and 15 minutes. After the game, I didn't feel particularly great about my play. Just in general, I mean, I knew that I had made that mistake earlier in the game when I played g6. I'll try and find that again. After, my first game where I didn't play very solidly, I made an early mistake, which crippled me in the middle game. After my second game, even though I won, I got the point. I just still wasn't feeling super great about the way that I played. I know that I had made some mistakes. I intentionally decided not to go and analyze this game. I had quite a bit of time between the second and third rounds, which all occurred in the same day, but I didn't want to look at this game. I know that there were things to learn from it, but I didn't want to make myself feel worse about the way I was playing that day, especially going into game 3. So if I think about this game where I could have played better, obviously playing g6 here was a blunder. It gave up a whole piece advantage down to a single pawn. I was very fortunate that my opponent didn't see it and he castled, but that was an opportunity where I could have played better. And I know there are several points in this game where there's a long mating sequence, mate in 7, mate in 6, by bringing my queen out here and starting this attack on the dark squares. But I wasn't really disappointed in my play after we traded down. So after this point, even though there were probably some mating sequences, I felt like I played quite solidly, sticking to chess principles in the end game that make sense, controlling open or half open files, completing my development, cutting off his king from my half of the board, and then getting my king involved slowly by marching it up with the intention to promote a pawn if it came to that. But because I was up so much material, it wasn't really necessary. So that's how the game ended. I was happy to get the point, slightly disappointed that I felt like I didn't play my best chess throughout the game, but it gave me a little bit of confidence back going into round 3. So I hope to get to analyze that game soon. I'll post another full review of it. If you made it this far in this video, thank you. I really appreciate you watching my content. I know this isn't my most popular content by any stretch of the imagination, but if you found this helpful, it'd be really helpful to me if you like this video, subscribe to my channel. I hope to continue posting more chess analysis. I hope it's valuable to maybe lower rated players or players maybe new to the over the board experience, wanting to learn kind of what's going through your head as you actually sit down face to face with another opponent in a rated game compared to the safety of your phone or your computer screen. So thank you for checking out the video, and until the next time, I hope you're well.